So, it seems that DICE has already set about fixing a bunch of things in Battlefield 2042 based on the feedback from the open beta. We're waiting for official info that's going to come later this week. There's going to be some sort of blog that's going to highlight all of the major changes, but there have been several developers speaking out on social media and the forums explaining some of the changes that are coming through, and I wanted to bring those together today in this video. Before that though, a quick word from today's sponsor, Alienware. They've not only hooked me up with a new gaming desktop PC, but also a new gaming laptop as well, the M15R5. It's a powerful unit, this one, combining an Intel i7 8-core CPU, 16GB of RAM, and an NVIDIA RTX 3070 laptop GPU. Plenty of grunt to run Battlefield 2042 when it launches, and other games launching this year as well. The RTX 3070, it gives you access to great features like NVIDIA DLSS, that uses AI to upscale your games from a lower resolution, resulting in higher frame rates, that's quite nice. And NVIDIA Reflex, a latency reduction tool for lowering the time it takes between you clicking your mouse and an action happening on the screen. And speaking of the screen, that's really what sets this laptop apart. It's an incredible 1440p 240Hz refresh rate panel. That's the same as what I'm using on my desktop PC. You're getting pretty much a desktop grade panel packed into a 15-inch laptop. That's kind of incredible. You're getting proper gaming performance in a portable form factor. Plus, the build quality on this thing is really solid. I think Alienware have done a great job with this machine, and if you want to learn more about the M15R5, then be sure to click the link at the top of the description. First of all, let's talk about movement, because that was one of the biggest topics that was up for debate in the open beta. Lots of feedback was coming in from players that felt the movement was too fast, and was trying to appeal to new audiences that like faster movement from other games out there on the market. I personally didn't really mind the movement all that much. It did need some refinement, it felt a little bit rough, but having spent the last 18 months playing Warzone, which uses that faster paced movement that other people like, I didn't feel like it was too much of a problem. So just take that into consideration when you think about my opinion. According to Drunksy, lead gameplay designer at DICE, some parts of the more advanced movement set from Battlefield 5 will be present in 2042, and one of those is ledge grabbing. An upgrade over Battlefield 5 though is that players will be able to grab ledges from above them, rather than just falling from a height and then hitting a button to grab the ledge as they fall. The reason this didn't show up in the open beta though is likely, first of all, it wasn't active, but also due to the way that DICE has designed their maps. Cover and objects in certain places are now going to be too high for you to grab and then pull yourself up onto, and I think that's a map design decision. The top threshold to activate this new ledge grab will be 2.4 meters, but a lot of the objects on Orbital in the beta were higher than that. 2.4 meters was also the threshold for pulling yourself up into cover in Battlefield 5, so according to Drunksy, the feature hasn't changed all that much, only that certain maps and locations will make more or less use of it depending on the map design. So, for example, some of the containers that you can see on the Orbital map, many players were saying, well, why can't I pull myself up onto the top of the containers? Those are 2.6 meters tall, and they're specifically designed to stop players leveraging their extra height to gain an advantage that would degrade overall gameplay flow. So that's quite interesting information, because I did feel that the map design in Battlefield 1 and 5 was a little bit worse than previous games because of new movement mechanics, like being able to pull yourself up over cover. Certain elements that should have been made taller to tailor gameplay into a better way, they weren't present in Battlefield 1 and 5, so you can pretty much do whatever you want, and maps were just designed differently. So it's great to hear that DICE is basically doing what they should have done in those games in 2042. They're building maps in a way that feels similar to older Battlefield games like Battlefield 4, where you couldn't pull yourself up and over certain parts of cover, but they do have that kind of movement in the game, and it will be available in certain locations. And as I said, it seems to all be based around map flow and gameplay quality. They don't want to put something in there that's going to make the gameplay feel worse. So they're being more selective about where you can do it, which I think is a good thing. Adding to this movement topic, DICE will also be adding the feature of being able to vault over moving objects. That was something that wasn't available in the open beta, and it didn't have a huge effect on gameplay, but on other maps it will, according to the team. Besides vehicles, the different maps will have several large moving objects that soldiers will be able to walk on, so having the feature active at launch for those maps, that will be quite interesting to find out. Apparently on the Manifest map, which has got the huge container docking yard, there are cranes that will be picking up those crates and moving them around, so perhaps that's one of the large objects that you'll be able to vault up onto. And then another movement element, the sliding animations. Again, according to Drunksy, the sliding in the beta, it locked you into like a single movement direction, and that was forward. So if you hit the slide button, you were going to just slide straight forwards. This is going to be updated a little bit to allow a small amount of directional movement during that slide. You won't be able to do like a full turn whilst you're sliding like you could in Battlefield 5 at some points, and before the slide was massively nerfed in Battlefield 1, but you'll have a little bit more control. So let's say you had cover on your left-hand side and you start that slide, you might be able to slightly turn yourself towards the cover and you'll be a little bit closer to it. Only by a few degrees either way, but it could make a big difference if you're out in the open and you want to enter cover quite quickly. And then also linked to the slide animation is that super aggressive FOV scaling. When you started the slide, it would really open up the field of view and make you feel like you were moving really, really fast. That's been massively reduced in the final build, and it's to rein in that perception that you were moving faster than you actually were. Jump spamming, that's also been fixed for the launch. Apparently that had already been fixed before the open beta, but since the build was a few months old, the fix wasn't in that build, but it was in the one that DICE was already working on. And then something else, some info on the sprinting speeds in 2042 compared to previous games. Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, they both had a max sprint speed of 6.04 meters per second. Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, they had max sprint speeds of 6.5 meters per second, but if you had the sprint perk on your soldier in those two games, it would increase to 7.15 meters per second, so pretty quick. The sprint speed in 2042 is also 6.5 meters per second, which matches Battlefield 3 and 4, those other modern Battlefield titles from the early 2010s. But 2042 does have that tactical sprint, which is the extra speed you get when you hold up the gun on the screen and you can move a little bit faster. That sprint speed is 7.25 meters per second, so just a little bit faster than BF3 and BF4 with the sprint perk enabled. But I'm going to assume that it's faster there because there are larger open areas where you could be running as a soldier or as part of a group and you want to get from cover to cover. I did quite a lot of running during the open beta, and the tactical sprint, it did feel like it was quite helpful when you were moving over that hill area that was covered in trees and bushes. It just made me feel quite a lot less vulnerable. With all of those movement changes though, it is safe to say that DICE got the message about the movement system in the open beta. There will be plenty of changes coming for the launch. And just a couple of extra bits of information that I found. The combat role that we saw in Battlefield 5, that's not coming back. And nor is the one where you can prone on your back and then you can rotate around into a normal prone position. Those have been removed due to their inclusion promoting camping, and DICE doesn't want that for 2042. And also crouch running and manual leaning, those are not currently planned features for 2042. The door isn't completely shut on either of those, but they are unlikely to return to the game. Moving on to something that I noticed quite a lot during the open beta, some questionable spawn points on some of the flags on the orbital map. Now, according to Peter Vesti, the studio level design director at DICE, after looking at the spawn data and plenty of videos of bad spawn locations, a bug was found where contested flag point spawns only kicked in when attackers had a majority of players on a flag. So whatever that means, it's already been fixed and it will be working for the launch. Now apparently 2042 is using a brand new spawning system that is far more complex than previous franchise implementations, but because of that complexity it can be tweaked on a per flag basis, which is quite interesting. The reason for a system like this is due to the greater number of players you've got, and of course the greater number of lines of sight that are then open on all of those players, and the flag locations that you can have in 2042 compared to previous games in the franchise. So having a new system like this with more granular control, that does make a lot of sense. Remains to be seen how effective it's going to be once launch comes around though. On the orbital map specifically, for the PS5, Xbox Series X and S and PC version of the game, where you've got up to 128 players, the level designer for Orbital, Kalle Nystrom, has confirmed that the number of tanks has been increased from 4 to 8. So there will be 4 on each team compared to the 2 on each team there was during the open beta version of the map. For PS4 and Xbox One versions, you are limited to 64 players, so the number of tanks is going to stay the same. That means 4 in total, 2 on each side. This means for the 128 player servers, more tank targets for players running the M5 recoilless launcher, but also there will be more threats if you're somebody who likes playing as infantry, so you have to watch out for more tanks. And then to finish up the video, currently no word right now on any changes to how the specialists are going to work for the launch of 2042. Personally, I think there's such a huge element of that core gameplay loop in 2042 that the chances of seeing any drastic changes at this point, they're pretty much next to none. With DICE maybe considering grouping them into class roles and maybe locking that second gadget slot down to just 1 or 2 options that are then linked to the role that the specialist actually plays. I know specialists are quite a sore point for some people around 2042, but considering we are just a few weeks from launch, I think this is the kind of framework that we're just going to have to expect to be largely the same when the game comes out, and that's unless, of course, DICE feels the feedback was just so profound during the open beta that their direction with them needs to completely change. Realistically, I don't think there's enough time for them to make any major changes for launch, but if the discontent amongst the community around specialists extends beyond launch into the first couple of seasons, then maybe DICE might consider making some changes. I just think, realistically, there's not enough time for them to really do anything about the specialists for launch, unless they're going to make some of those tweaks, like I said, categorizing those specialists into classes and then locking down the second gadget slot so those gadgets reflect the classes that the specialists end up in. I think that would have been the best overall solution. Then you could have had the specialists, but you also could have had the classes. But whatever happens right now, I think we can confidently say that the specialist conversation, it's going to carry on after the launch of 2042. And right now, that's about it. Like I say, later this week, DICE will be releasing a proper blog post about a bunch of things that they've learned from the open beta, and that will likely give us more information on any gameplay changes they're going to make. Plus, we will have details on the 5 remaining specialists that will launch with the game as well, so I'll bring you 2 videos together for that kind of information. But thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.